Assalamu alaikum. In the name of God, the merciful, the beneficent, peace be upon you all. Truly, all praise be to Allah. We praise Him, we seek His help, and ask for His forgiveness. We seek refuge in Allah from the evils of ourselves and our bad actions. Whomsoever He guides, none can turn him astray. And the one He turns astray, no one can guide. I bear witness that there is none worthy of worship besides Allah, the one and the only, without no partners. And I bear witness that Muhammad, peace be upon him, is His servant and final messenger. Good evening, brothers and sisters, family and friends. Tonight is Who is Waddan? The origins of Shirk.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
وقالوا لا تذرن آلهتكم ولا تذرن ودا ولا سواعا ولا يغوث ويعوق ونسرا.
And they have said, forsake not your gods, forsake not Wad nor Suwa nor Yaguth, Ya'uq, and Nasr. So in this verse, this is the underlying foundation. We're going to look at the context. In Surah Nuh, what was life like? What was life like before the flood? What were the trees like? What was the air like? How big did people grow? How old did they live? What type of buildings did they build? Then we're going to look into their beliefs. A lot of them were pagans, and we'll go into these false gods that they talk about, and then supporting hadith. So the antediluvian world means the world before the flood. And as you can see here, Ibn Abbas narrated that Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, between Noah and Adam were 10 generations. So according to this chart from other people of the book, we can see literally 10 generations spanning between Adam and Noah. It gives us a kind of idea of what things look like. And as for the flood, the ancient Greeks have a story called the flood or deluge of Deucalion. Many publications. And here's the one in Akkadian, found in the British Museum in London. This one dates back to 7th century BC, and its original copy goes further back. And this is before Christianity and Judaism. The first emperors of China, Fuzai and Nuwa. Notice the etymology. This is Dr. Li. In one of the folk songs by the Hmong, they say, thunder sent water and destroyed the earth. Why don't you know? So even in China, they're talking about a great flood where there were flood survivors. This is the Book of the Invasions, found in Ireland. It talks about Bith, son of Noah. And the key thing is it talks about Bith dying. He doesn't make it on the boat. He doesn't make it on the ark, and he dies. In Islam, we can confirm this. So it's interesting to see civilizations like this echo the same things that are truth in the Quran. Now, the other thing about Ireland, I know you all are dying to talk about this, Stonehenge. Stonehenge, according to the Historia Regum Britannia, it talks about the giants of old brought them from the farthest coast of Africa. So it's relating megalithic structures, giant people, and the fact that there was a flood that destroyed the world. This is what we're getting from the outside sources. Let's look at Tiahuanaca. Tiahuanaca is in South America, and we have Aswan, Egypt. Both dated astronomically to 10,000 BC. The Great Pyramids of Giza, the American Geological Institute, along with Dr. Robert Schoch, have redated it to 9,000 BC. Further away from the flood, we still have giants living. The story of Goliath. He was a giant. And then his son, Solomon, built a great temple. He summoned the jinn. And the jinn built a great temple. So what we have are large architectural feats related to large people.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
ألم تر كيف فعل ربك بعاد إرم ذات العماد التي لم يخلق مثلها في البلاد وثمود الذين جابوا الصخر بالواد وفرعون ذي الأوتاد الذين طغوا في البلاد فأكثروا فيها الفساد فصب عليهم ربك سوط عذاب.
This is the destruction of the nations that did not follow the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The nations named, one of them was Thamud. They were known, all these nations, by their great architecture. So the Thamud built massive monasteries and buildings out the sides of the mountains. And today in Petra and in Mahda al-Saleh, you'll see evidences of this ancient nation of Thamud. The tribe of Ad descends from Aram, the city of Aram of the pillars. On the right, you'll see the tallest pillars still standing today. Roman temple of Jupiter. You see those two tiny dots in between? Those are people. So you kind of get a size. Aram was much bigger than this. And in Yemen, in this area, there was a large wind that came and destroyed and obliterated the city. So when we talk about this, we can see other proofs in the Norse. We talk about a man named Had. We talk about the Haidoromat, Ptolemy's Udites, in Genesis, Adma city. In the Assyrian inscription of Sargon II, we have the tribe of Ibni Ud and the conquest of Adumu. So in many historical documents, we see this nation. As for the stakes, this is in Baalbek. You see the size of it. Massive stones. We don't know how they moved them. The pharaoh was the owner of the stakes. And here in Aswan, Egypt, you see one that's going to be carved into an obelisk, much like the Washington Monument. It's a large piece of stone that stands vertically. And on the other side, in Göbekli Tepe, Turkey, you have one that dates back to 10,000 BC. So we're starting to see a trend here. The largest pyramid in the world, Pyramid of Cholula, is right here in Mexico. The legend behind it is that there were giants in those days, and that a giant named Zelhua survived the flood. He was named the architect, and he built this great pyramid as a memorial. And next to that, you have the Sphinx of Giza, courtesy of Robert Schoch. You can see the original statue was a giant lion sculpture. And later on, the pharaohs came and defaced it and put their own face on it. But we're seeing the same trend. Large stone structures, a flood, and giants. So Dr. Robert Schoch, he has a degree from Yale University. He's a geophysicist. He has an Emmy Award for redating the Sphinx complex. He dated Göbekli Tepe, Turkey, off the border of Turkey and Syria. When they teach you guys in school, you learn about Sumer and the first civilization, dating back to 6,000 BC, 4,000 BC. We're looking at civilizations that are estimated to have existed at 10,000 BC. This image right here, this animation, shows the Bering Strait. This is Alaska connected to Siberia, Russia. And a long time ago, about 10,000 years ago, there used to be massive glaciers. And based on ice core data, this is a real geological science, they've estimated that the melting could have happened literally in 3 years or overnight. Because of this, it makes it scientifically possible that we have a worldwide flood. Geologists are telling us this, but they're arguing about small things like how it happened, a meteor, plasma from the sun, microwaves. So if there was a great flood, that means we'll see evidence of the water level rising, right? Ancient civilizations with man would have sunk to the bottom. In Yonaguni, Japan, we have what's known as the Dragon's Triangle, Lemuria and Mu. Dr. Schoch and many geologists have published that this used to be above water at one time. In Bimini Road and Andros Platform in the Americas, so that's the Everglade marshlands, Bermuda Island, and the Bahamas, constituting the Bermuda Triangle. So there's a lot of controversy surrounding these two spots, but the key thing to know is that it was remnants of an ancient civilization. So pre-flood lifespan. The scientific theory is that before the flood, there was higher atmospheric pressure, more oxygen. Electromagneticity was different, pH balance was different. But after the flood, as you can see on this chart right here, we start living 600 years of age. We start dying at 200, start dying at 120, and we know now most of us die around 60 to 80 years old. Dr. Carl Ball created a biosphere and increased oxygen levels, increased atmospheric pressure, and was able to, his claims are, he doubled the size of piranhas.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
ولقد أرسلنا نوحا إلى قومه فلبث فيهم 1000 سنة إلا 50 عاما فأخذهم الطوفان وهم ظالمون.
And verily we sent Noah, and he continued with them for 1,000 years, say 50 years. Noah lived to be 950 years old, according to the Quran. And unfortunately, there are other sects like the Ahmadiyyas. They have some weak hadith. I'll give you an example. This hadith says that every messenger lives half the life as the one before it. And because of that, they said, well, Muhammad died around 60. So the prophet before him was Isa alayhi salam, that was a Rasul. So because of that, we think Isa died at 120, and because we think he died, he's not the Messiah. Astaghfirullah. My point is to use a methodology to get an understanding as to not just this is a weak hadith, but why it's a weak hadith, how it got lost in translation, the science of it. So here, if we look at the extra sources from the people of the book, we see Noah lived to be 950, Saleh alayhi salam 433, Abraham at 175, Moses at 120, and Muhammad, peace be upon them all, at 63. So we do see this hadith has some truth to it. They lived less and less and less. But Isa alayhi salam was taken up to the heavens. Therefore, the next Rasul before that brought the Torah and 10 Commandments, is Musa alayhi salam. They say he died at 120. So it does match in a way. These texts were found in a cave very recently. They're called the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Nag Hammadi Library. Very interesting stuff. They date back very ancient times. And the Book of Enoch within it is still today used in the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. And here's what it says in there. And said to him, tell him my name, and reveal to him the end which is to come. For the whole earth will be destroyed, and the water of the deluge is about to come. So alhamdulillah, this is a story of what the scholars say is Idris alayhi salam, relating to the flood. And in Genesis, it goes into more detail in the Old Testament of the Bible. It says, there were giants in the earth in those days. And also after that, when the Elohim came unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them. They believe that there was a hybrid race of jinn and the daughters of Qabil. Remember, Qabil is outcasted. So there's a corruption. The people of the book don't accept what they say, but don't deny what they say. We just take it as commentary. So we take this and we look at it. We say Adam alayhi salam came. After him, Idris dealt with the corruption. And because of this corruption, Allah wanted to find survivors, people who were worthy, who didn't commit shirk, and that was Nuh alayhi salam. So we see kind of the science of why each prophet was sent. So I'm pretty sure there are no polytheists here. Any polytheists? Hands? No? Majority of us, we're all monotheists. We believe in one God, one creator.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
واذكر في الكتاب إدريس إنه كان صديقا نبيا ورفعناه مكانا عليا.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
وإن إلياس لمن المرسلين إذ قال لقومه ألا تتقون أتدعون بعلا وتذرون أحسن الخالقين الله ربكم ورب آبائكم الأولين.
And make mention of Idris. Lo, he was a saint, a prophet, and we raised him to a high station. And lo, Ilyas was one of those sent to warn when he said unto his folk, will ye not ward off evil? Will ye cry unto Baal and forsake the best of creators, Allah, your Lord and Lord of your forefathers? So the reason I'm putting these two up here is because there's a theory. Before the flood, the world was one nation, one ummah, one language, one king. And after the flood, people became different nations, different tongues. So we call the people before the flood by different names today. And we're going to see examples of that. There's a scholar with the first name M. I won't say his name just not to say it, but many people agree with him. They think Ilyas is the same person as Idris. Astaghfirullah, peace be upon them both. They are two different prophets. So it's kind of a mix-up. Because Ilyas lived before the flood, they think he wasn't Adam, alayhi salam. He wasn't Nuh, alayhi salam. So he must be Idris. They just assume that. And when we look at Idris, the Sufis and the Gnostics, they say that he's the equivalent of a man named Hermes Thrice-Wise. Hermes Thrice-Wise is a legendary being. But he was worshipped by the Egyptians, the Romans, and the Greeks as not a trinity god, but a triune god. One god with three different names. His name in the Norse is Hermod, very similar name, carrying the same staff, having the same wings. We'll have his name in Egyptian Thoth. His true form is the baboon god, the ape king. Hanuman, the monkey statue, the monkey god of the Hindus. And then what about Sun Wukong in the Chinese? The monkey king, Jet Li, this epic monkey god. Dragon Ball Z, Son Goku. We're talking about different civilizations after these great prophets died. Unfortunately, people started worshiping them. So that's the trend. And when we look at Ilyas, we'll see the same thing. In the Greeks, they have an Olympia named Ilias. Literally, Ilias. We pronounce it Helios because it's Romanized with the H from the Eta. It's pronounced Elijah in Hebrew. Sol Invictus in the Romans. Horus in the Egyptian. These are the sun gods, false gods. And Horus had a falcon head. On the opposite side of the world, there's a god for the Mayans and the Aztecs called Quetzalcoatl and Kukulkan. And this false god had feathers like a bird. Amazing. On the opposite side of the world, and they're worshiping the same false god. Again, an ancient messenger of God passed away, and after he passed away, they started worshiping him. So how do we determine how historic this is? We have ancient kings list. The Sumerian and the Egyptian kings list. These are ancient artifacts dating back thousands of years. And at the very top, they have a line that says, "This is the flood." And above that, they list 8 kings. And it's not just one stone or 2 stones, it's many stones. We have multiple lists, and they all line up. Let's real quick go over this chart. They say the first 2 kings of the Sumerians were legendary rulers. These ancient kings of earth before the flood, some of them were prophets. So when we look here, there's only 2 names that we recognize: Dumuzi, the shepherd, and Ubarat Utu. Utu was known as the false sun god by the Babylonians. And this is an image of Dumuzi, the shepherd, giving the wisdom to Hammurabi. So Utu, we just talked about Elias, who was worshipped as the sun god, and Horus, worshipped as the sun god. So on that Egyptian stone, we have Horus, and he matches up, he lines up perfectly. So here's the image of Helios. This is the ancient city of Rhodes, the port city, much like the Statue of Liberty. We do have images today that give us evidences of an old ancient world. The next on the Egyptian kings list is Thoth. Very easy to plug in. His equivalent, we talked Hermes thrice wise, Thoth, and Enoch. Does anyone know the story of Abel? What was Abel's job? Habil, the son of Adam. Anybody? He was a shepherd. He had a flock. And he sacrificed a portion of his greatest flock to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah blessed him and accepted his sacrifice. And we'll talk about his brother Qabil in a minute. So Dumuzid was the only shepherd before the flood on the Sumerian kings list. And in monotheism, the only shepherd known before on the monotheistic kings list is Habil. So we're going to use that as a starting point. This is the ibis form, the magical form, like the masquerade. They wear that occult wisdom, knowledge, beak mask. His true form is the baboon god. We talked about that. Hermes. He was the first person to write with a pen, the master of writing. So when you think of Flash and these DC comic books, these might be superheroes, but they're based on the original superheroes, the prophets. So Habil's younger brother. Anyone knows Habil's younger brother? Close. That was his older brother. Good job. Anyone know his younger brother? His younger brother is a king named Shaith. And he was inherited kingship from Adam because Qabil murdered Habil. Astaghfirullah. So when we look at pre-flood kings, the only Seth that I found was in the Egyptian kings. On the Egyptian black stone, there's a king named Set. Literally Seth. And when you see the Greek equivalent, Zeus. The Greeks conquered Egypt, Ptolemy of Egypt, after Alexander the Great. So all the hieroglyphics were translated to Greek. So the word Suta was transliterated to Suth. And that's where you get Zeus. Shaith and Cain were brothers. Zeus and Hades were brothers. Set and Osiris were brothers. Who knows about Qabil? Anybody? What was his occupation? That was Habil. Qabil was a farmer. He sacrificed the worst of his crops, and Allah did not accept his sacrifice. So he got jealous and he murdered his brother. From the people of the book, they say Qabil, after he murdered his brother Abel, he was outcasted and sent to the land of Nod. Hades was a brother of Zeus, and after a great war, Hades was outcasted to Tartarus, the underworld. Osiris was a brother of Set, and after a great war, was outcast to the underworld. You're starting to see a pattern? So this is Osiris. He's green for rebirth, the god of vegetation. But we just talked about this. Qabil was a farmer. So we can see how the religion gets twisted over many years. Before these 3, they had a father. Who was the father of Qabil, Habil, and Seth? Adam alayhi salam. So in the Greek, the 3 brothers, Hades, Poseidon, and Zeus, they have a father named Cronus. And Osiris and Set have a father named Jeb. A lot of Greek historians publish this. Why is this one missing? It's very simple. Osiris is Cain, and Cain killed Abel. Because Cain killed Abel, and Cain was outcasted, his followers did not acknowledge his rival as a king. They didn't acknowledge Habil as a king. Okay, so we're getting to the legendary rulers, and I'm going to try to make this fast. Who was given custodianship of earth before mankind? Anybody? The jinn. Who was the king of the jinn? Iblis. His name in the monotheistic text is Lucifer. Lucifer means very bright. Here's his name in the Egyptian, Ra. It's really ray, like a sun ray, very bright. It's kind of funny, you start to see everyone loves Raymond, I love Lucy. Hyperion in the Greek. Hyperion means very, hyper, bright, ion. Who's ranked above Iblis and the jinn and the angels and the human beings? Who's ranked the highest? If you had a list like this, who would be ranked at the very top? In the Sumerian, we have Alulim, Alu. In Egyptian, Amun. Every day in prayer, we say, Ameen. So be it, as in be, exist, the commandment of God. The Greeks called it Waranos. Waranos was the ancient Greek astronomical depiction of the Milky Way galaxy. In monotheism, we know him as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Al-Hayyu Al-Qayyum, the ever-living. In Hebrew, it's the tetragrammaton, Yahuwah. And Yahuwah means the ever-living. This is not something new, brothers and sisters. This is something old. This is an ancient text from the people of the book that was rejected during the councils. But it says Elohim had a bear face and Yahweh had a cat face. One is righteous, one is unrighteous. And one was set over water and one was set over fire. And with these he called the names Cain and Abel. So this is an old ancient text before Islam. This is talking about Qabil and Habil having characteristics of the ancient pagan false Greek gods and the false Egyptian gods. When we talked about Kronos, his equivalency, Adam, Kronos was known, astaghfirullah, as the god of time. And his symbol was this black cube, the cube of life. And it has a relation to Judaism. They pray with this black box on their forehead, a black box on their arm. What was the building that Adam built? The Kaaba. It's the black cube. At this point, it's beyond a reasonable doubt that other cultures around the world echo the same symbolism that the Quran echoes because the Quran is truth. So we have an origin, a basis, a foundation, the Quran, and on it we expand and we find evidences that the Quran has reached many civilizations. What about the ancient queens of the prophets? They all match up. And we have hundreds of publications that confirm it. The Sibylline oracles say that the author is the sister of Isis. And this is a Greek publication. The lord of Arada and Merkar on the Sumerian king list after the flood is a guy who built Uruk, an ancient city. The people of the book, they talk about an ancient city of Erech, built by Nimrod, Namrud, the Tower of Babel. So Namrud had a vizier, a right-hand man, a high priest. He was in charge of all the idols. Likewise, in the Sumerian and Merkar, he had a high-level priest. So in the story in Islam, who is that high priest? Who was he? He is the father of Ibrahim alayhi salam. The father of Ibrahim alayhi salam was the high priest in charge of all the idols. The son of the vizier in the Sumerian, his name is Gilgamesh. Do y'all know the Epic of Gilgamesh? Show of hands. The Epic of Gilgamesh states that there's this epic mythology of a great superhero stronger than Hercules that goes out and does a lot of good in the world. When we think of Ibrahim alayhi salam, we think of an old man with a long beard, lived a long life, with a holy book and people following him and a walking stick. But this story is saying that he was a superhero. He was strong. There was no creature on earth that can battle against him. He was a king. And a lot of you say, this is just a myth. Well, here's an example. There's a man named St. Nicholas, and I feel bad for the guy because he might have donated gifts to some orphanage a long time ago in Europe. Try to do something good for the people. But today, I read his story, St. Nicholas, and he gained a lot of weight. He's busy. He has to ride this magic sled in 12 hours and have reindeer pull it with a bright nose, evade all form of law enforcement, and yet NORAD can track him. Then he's able to fit down chimneys of every house without getting burned and deliver gifts and coal to every human being that's good. And not only that, but sustain himself on nothing but milk and cookies. But beyond the fact, he's able to live a good life. He gets sponsorship from big sports companies, Coca-Cola. They look out for him. So Santa Claus is living at large in the North Pole in his mansion with a slave army of elves that work 24/7 from him. Life is good, right? How did this story of a Saint Nicholas delivering gifts to an orphanage become that ludicrous thought, this capitalistic idol? Do you see how the story got twisted? A good man, a righteous man, and slowly after many generations, he becomes an idol that kids ask for things. So I'm going to try to wrap this up. This is the last section. Monotheism, Islam, Judaism, Christianity. We talked about it. This is called the God of Abraham. They're cut from the same cloth. Likewise, polytheism, the God of lightning in Rome, the God of lightning in Greece, the God of lightning in Egypt, they're all the same. So these are all cut from the same cloth. And we're going to throw in the Norse for this guy named Seth. So in the Norse, they call him Odin. It was three brothers, Odin, Vili, and Ve. Well, in the Greek, there were three brothers, Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades. In the Norse, they fought a war against giants. They fought a war against bigger gods. And then after that, they ruled in Asgard. Let's look at the Greek. They fought against giants. Then they fought against another class of gods, the Titanomachy. And then they ruled from a place called Mount Olympus. Let's look at his title, Odin. He's known as the father of all gods and men. In the Greek poetry, Zeus is known as the father of all gods and men. Literally, word for word, when translated from two different ancient languages to English, it's the same name. Oh, what about Kung Fu? Wudang Mountain. How many people seen Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon? There's Shaolin Kung Fu, and there's Wudang Tai Chi. So Wudang is based on an ancient Taoist monk that's immortal, some legendary tale they have. So it's cool to see the etymology of Wudang even far off in Asia. It's a name that everyone has. Getting back on track, let's look at Woden. Woden is from Old English, the Old High German Waddan, Old Saxon Uwoden, remember W is two U's. It says Uwoden is a major deity of Anglo-Saxon and continental Germanic polytheism, so Germanic pagan gods. Together with his Norse counterpart Odin, Woden represents a development of Proto-Germanic Waddanas. It's saying the oldest and most recognized form of Waddan is Waddanas. You've heard of Waddanas, right? You use it every day in your calendars. Wednesday, Waddan's Day. Then we have Tuesday, the god Tyr. Thursday, Odin had a son Thor, so it's Thor's Day. Freya, the goddess, Friday. We talked about Saturn, the Roman version of Adam. Saturn Day. The sun god, Helios, Sunday. We didn't talk about the moon god yet, the false moon god, but that's Monday. So here's proof on set. It's pronounced Suta because Suten in hieroglyphics means king. Sutenant means kingship, kingdom, and Sutenant means crown of the south. The Hurrian parallels, the Greek origins, and Herodotus, he points out that the Egyptians first brought into use the names of the 12 false gods, which the Greeks took over from them. So it's saying that the Greeks got their false gods from the Egyptians. They're admitting to it. It's not even a secret anymore. Here's an image of Astaghfirullah of the king Seth, and he has 2 horns on his head. And here's his version, Zeus Amon, with 2 horns on his head. Again, translation faults. So right here, we're seeing the parallels. Waddan to Odin, Wotan, Wudang, Sudan, Ziddan, Zeus, Sutha, Seth. The translation faults from Waddan, the Ain, the Omega, can be mistaken for a W, the while the Upsilon and Psi could be mistaken. The Psi has an S sound, like psychic. Translation fault, we talk about the sigma eta theta, and the vowel faults. The feather and bird makes the W, ooh. The bird by itself is a short U, ooh. The feather, a Y, E. So because of these mathematical possibilities, we know that these translation faults exist. So a lot of scholars will say, Shaith is not mentioned in the Quran. You're right. The word Shaith is not in the Quran. The word Waddan is. And Waddan was a king.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim.
كان الناس أمة واحدة فبعث الله النبيين مبشرين ومنذرين وأنزل معهم الكتاب بالحق ليحكم بين الناس فيما اختلفوا فيه وما اختلف فيه إلا الذين أوتوه من بعد ما جاءتهم البينات بغيا بينهم فهدى الله الذين آمنوا لما اختلفوا فيه من الحق بإذنه والله يهدي من يشاء إلى صراط مستقيم.
Mankind was one community, and then prophets were sent. Ibn Kathir, I advise you to go purchase this book. It's a great book. It talks about Shaith. And in it, he says when Shaith dies, duty was taken over by Yared, Jared. And after that, Jared died. And after that, his son, Enoch, inherited it. So Ibn Kathir right here is saying, this is Idris alayhi salam according to the majority of the scholars. So a long time ago, they were trying to put these parallels together. They just didn't have the finds in the internet that we have today. A lot of people like this chart, courtesy of Salman Khalid. You can see the entire lineage of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. You can see when you follow his chart all the way up to Ibrahim alayhi salam, you can follow up higher. And you have Nuh alayhi salam, Idris, Shaith alayhi salam, and Adam alayhi salam. So after this, we become nations and tribes, so we're different. But before that, we all share the same DNA as these four great kings. The people of the book, they all agree and say that Seth was a great king and he was sent as a gift to Adam alayhi salam, to Eve, to take the place of Habil alayhi salam. All three of them have sources for that. About Waddan and so on, Yaghuth, Ya'uq, Nasra. Ibn Abbas explained, following upon the death of those righteous men, Satan, Shaitan inspired people to erect statues in the places where they used to sit. They did this, but these statues were not worshipped until the coming of generations deviating from the right way of life. Then they worshipped them as idols later. And then Ibn Jarir narrated, they were righteous men. So both of them are saying Waddan was a righteous man. He lived between the period of Adam and Noah, and he had followers who held them as models, meaning these were upstanding men that you wanted to be like. They believed in Allah, they made salat. After their death, their friends who used to emulate them said, if we make statues, it'll be more pleasing. And just to sum it up, what ends up happening is the shaitan comes and says, don't be sad. Let's build an image and we'll come here. We won't worship it. We're just going to come here and stand in front of it and you'll remember him and you won't be sad. So they said, okay, they built it. 3 generations later, the grandchildren are there. Still sad. The shaitan comes. Remember, shaitan could be a jinn. It could be a man. It comes and says, look, you guys are sad. Why don't we put the statue in your home, a smaller version? Then you'll remember him. You won't be sad. The people said, okay, let's do this. 3 generations later, they were standing in front of these statues. Shaitan came and said, do you know what these statues are? And they said, no, our grandparents used to stand here and cry for some reason. Shaitan said, oh, this is the god of weather. You're supposed to pray to it for rain. This is the hadith, authentic hadith, on how Waddan became the first weather god. This is the story of Zeus. According to the tafsir, to the hadith, and in the Quran, it's explaining the origin of Greek gods, Roman gods, the pagan gods. So Abi Hatim related, Waddan was a righteous man. All the idols worshipped at the time of Nuh alayhi salam were worshipped at the time of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Using the Proto-Germanic, we know who Wad was. Wad was Waddanas, Suwa was Sawillo, Yaghuth is Gautas, Ya'uka is Auzawandalas, Nasra is Nerthus. Very easy, because this is the Proto-Germanic. Hu Baal. Baal means Lord. Hu is a word that you use like Allahu. Baal was an ancient jinn. Ilyas alayhi salam in the Quran battles him. And in one outside source from the people of the book, it says that there were 3 jinn that were princes and kings at the time of Sulaiman alayhi salam. These 3 were known as Iblis, Lucifer, ruled over Asia and Europe. The other was Baal, Baalzebub, ruled over Africa and the Middle East. The third was one named Astaroth, or Roth, ruled over the Americas. So we don't know if this is true or not, but we do know the ranking that they give him is the second ranking after Iblis. So after Iblis, he's the next most powerful. So you kind of get a picture of Baal. When Sulaiman summoned Baal, they said that all the demons, all the other ones were crying. They were humiliated because their king was being enslaved. So this is kind of the concept of it. Here's a few shocking images. Don't have nightmares. Baal-zebub and Hubal. And this is what they claim as a false goddess of Arabia, one of this guy's daughters, Manat. And she's based on the Egyptian Ma'at.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
أفرأيتم اللات والعزى ومناة الثالثة الأخرى
Lat, Usa, Manat. They relate to Aphrodite, Isis, and Ma'at. So what we're seeing is a trend. Before the flood, people forgot and started worshiping the ancient earth kings. Then after the flood, people forgot and started worshiping the ancient earth queens. Isn't that horrible? They're worshiping kings and queens, ancestor worship. Does anyone want to take a guess at what the grand conclusion is in all this? Why are we learning about ancient civilizations, the context of Nuh alayhi salam, polytheism, hadith that tie it all in? Why? What's the point? Anybody? The conclusion is Tawheed. When I was young, I grew up and watched the show called Home Improvement. I'm not advocating TV, of course. Show in the 90s, highest paid actor, Tim Allen, got paid $1 million per episode. Within it is a show called Tool Time. In this show, he teaches home improvement. But the catch is, here's the gimmick. Every show, he catches on fire, gets electrocuted, staples himself to the wall. He does it the complete wrong way. But it's a hit show. Why? Because the audience learns to not make the same mistake he did. They learn by seeing the wrong way that they learned the right way to do it. And in the Quran, we talked about Thamud, Ad, Pharaoh, being destroyed. They weren't destroyed for no reason, guys. The flood didn't happen for no reason. It's kind of like the home improvement thing. The analogy I'm trying to relate with y'all is all these stories is to make us not have that same mistake. So the other conclusion I want to draw before I end this is when you have madrasa and you're teaching kids, so when they ask about the Greek gods, it's not a made-up myth. It's an exaggerated story, but these were real men, real kings that people later started worshiping. I'm going to be giving another series. Another thought was the Genies and Aliens lecture about the jinn and malaika. Another one was prophets as superheroes, talk about people like Luqman and Al-Khidr and things of that sort. Special thanks to ISGH, Dr. Ismail Bakr and Brother Abdul Rahman and everyone who helped set up. Whatever was true in this presentation comes from Allah. Whatever was false comes from myself. And this time I'd like to ask Allah to bless us with wisdom. I'd like Him to please help us with the public school system and deal with it and integrate Islam into our full education. Please accept our prayers and forgive our sins. Because exalted is your Lord, the Lord of might above what they describe. And peace be upon the messengers, and praise to Allah, the Lord of the worlds. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين.